The message arrived on a Tuesday morning. It came not through radio waves or satellites, but through a small silver sphere that appeared in the middle of the United Nations headquarters in New York. The sphere floated 3 feet above the ground, spinning slowly, and when the security guards tried to touch it, their hands passed through like it was made of smoke. Then it spoke. The voice was cold and ancient. It said that humanity had been noticed. It said that the Galactic Assembly, a council of 4,000 species that had existed for 2 million years, wished to discuss Earth's future. It said that one representative must come alone to station eternity at the edge of the solar system. It said that humanity had 7 days to decide. Then the sphere vanished, leaving behind only a set of coordinates and a warning. Do not send weapons. Do not send lies. We will know. The world went mad for 6 days. Governments argued, religious leaders prayed, scientists tried to understand how the sphere had appeared, military commanders wanted to send soldiers, politicians wanted to send themselves. Everyone had an opinion about who should speak for all of humanity. On the 7th day, they chose Park. Was 43 years old. She had spent 20 years as a crisis negotiator for the United Nations. She had talked to warlords in burning cities. She had sat across from terrorists who held children hostage. She had walked into rooms where everyone wanted to kill everyone else, and she had walked out with peace agreements signed in shaking hands. She was not famous, she was not powerful, she was simply very, very good at making people listen. When they told her she had been chosen, was sitting in her small apartment in Seoul, drinking tea and reading a book about ancient Korean poetry. Her phone rang, and a voice told her that the fate of 8 billion people now rested on her shoulders. She finished her tea before she answered. I will go, she said, but I need to understand something first. Do they want to talk to us or do they want to judge us? The voice on the phone was silent for a long moment. Then it said, we don't know. Nodded to herself. She had negotiated with people who wanted to talk, and she had negotiated with people who had already made up their minds. The second kind was always harder, but not impossible. Send me everything you have, she said. Every transmission, every analysis, every guess, I leave in 2 days. The ship they gave her was called the, named after the river that flowed through Seoul. It was humanity's first true starship, built in secret over 15 years using technology that was still not fully understood. It was fast, but it was fragile. It could carry 10 people comfortably, but would travel with only one companion. His name was, he was 28 years old, a lieutenant in the Korean Space Force, and he had been chosen to pilot the because he was the best pilot humanity had ever produced. He was also terrified, though he hid it well behind jokes and a bright smile. So, said as they boarded the ship, any advice for meeting aliens who might want to destroy our entire species? Looked at him. His hands were steady on the controls, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his voice. Yes, she said, don't let them see you sweat. Laughed, but the laugh was hollow. That's it, that's your wisdom. Fear is natural, said, but fear makes people do stupid things. When you walk into a room full of enemies, they expect you to be afraid. They expect you to beg or to threaten or to make mistakes. The most powerful thing you can do is to simply not. And if they decide to kill us anyway? Smiled, it was a small smile, quiet and calm. Then we die with dignity, but I don't think they will. They invited us to talk. That means they're curious. Curious people don't destroy things, they study them. Before they left Earth's orbit, Admiral came aboard for a final briefing. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes like chips of ice. She had commanded fleets, won battles, and buried friends. She was not someone who showed emotion easily. But when she looked at, there was something soft in her gaze, something almost like hope. I won't lie to you, the Admiral said. We have no idea what you're walking into. Our intelligence is based on fragments and guesses. We know the assembly is old. We know they've been watching us for at least a century. And we know they've destroyed other species before, species they considered too dangerous to let grow. Do they consider us dangerous? Asked. We went from horses to nuclear weapons in 200 years, from nuclear weapons to starships in another 100. Yes, Ambassador. They consider us very dangerous indeed. Nodded slowly. She had expected this. Humans were not the strongest species, not the oldest, but they were fast. They learned quickly, adapted quickly, and when they set their minds to something, they did not stop until it was done. That kind of determination could look like ambition, or it could look like a threat. "What do you want me to do?" asked. Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Make them understand we're not a threat," she said. "And if you can't do that, make them understand we're not prey either. Humanity doesn't beg, Ambassador, we never have. Whatever happens out there, remember that." Placed her hand over the Admiral's. "I will." 3 hours later, the left Earth behind. Stood at the observation window and watched her home shrink from a world to a marble to a point of light among millions of others. Somewhere down there, 8 billion people were waiting for news. 8 billion lives depending on what she said and did in the coming days. The weight of it should have crushed her, but had carried heavy weights before. She had learned long ago that the only way to bear them was to focus on the next step, then the next, then the next. She turned away from the window and walked to her quarters. There was work to do, files to read, strategies to plan, words to choose. The assembly had existed for 2 million years. They had seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and die. They thought they knew everything. Intended to show them something new, Station Eternity was older than Earth's sun. It hung in the darkness between stars like a frozen thought, a structure so vast that its mind refused to fully understand it. The station was shaped like a flower with 1,000 petals, each petal large enough to hold a city, each city home to species that had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to walk upright. Brought into the docking bay with steady hands, though could see sweat on his forehead. Around them, ships of every shape and size floated in organized rows. Some were sleek and silver, others were organic and pulsing with strange light. Some had no visible form at all, just areas of bent space where something existed that human eyes could not process. "We're the smallest ship here," said quietly, "by a lot." "Size doesn't matter," replied, "only what's inside." A guide was waiting for them at the airlock. It was a tall creature made of something like glass, with lights flickering inside its transparent body like trapped fireflies. It did not introduce itself. It simply turned and began walking, expecting them to follow. Followed, stayed with the ship as planned. He would monitor communications and be ready to leave at a moment's notice if things went wrong. They both knew that if things went truly wrong, leaving would not be an option, but having a plan helped. The walk to the grand chamber took an hour. Passed through corridors that shifted and changed, through gardens filled with plants that sang, through markets where beings traded in currencies that had no physical form. Everywhere she went, creatures stopped to stare at her. Some with eyes, some with sensors, some with senses she could not name. She was the curiosity here, the new thing, the unknown. Kept her back straight and her face calm. She had been stared at before. The grand chamber was a sphere. There was no other way to describe it. A perfect sphere, miles across, with no visible floor or ceiling. Gravity worked differently here, pulling delegates toward the outer walls, so that the chamber was lined with thousands of beings arranged in tiers like an enormous living amphitheater. Its place was near the bottom, not the very bottom, she noticed. There were a few species below her, beings that had not yet developed language or fire. But humanity was close. Close enough to understand the message: you are young, you are small, you do not matter yet. She took her seat and waited. The assembly speaker appeared in the center of the sphere. It was called the Arbiter, and it was ancient beyond words. Its body was like a mountain that had learned to move, covered in symbols that glowed with inner light. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. The assembly recognizes the presence of the human representative. The matter before us today is the classification and disposition of the species known as humanity. Let the evidence be presented. The first to speak were They existed as pure energy, clouds of light that shifted and danced as they communicated. Their representative projected images into the center of the chamber, images of human history. Watched as her species was laid bare before 4,000 alien civilizations. She saw wars, endless wars. World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, and 100 smaller conflicts that had killed millions. She saw nuclear explosions blooming like flowers of death. She saw forests burning, oceans filling with poison, species after species going extinct because humans could not control their hunger. They spoke in a voice like wind chimes. This species has existed for approximately 300,000 years. In that time, they have killed more of their own kind than any natural disaster in their planet's history. They have destroyed their own environment for short-term gain. They have created weapons capable of ending all life on their world, and they have come close to using them multiple times. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, kept her face still. Next came they were crystalline beings, their bodies made of something like living diamond. Their representative floated forward and addressed the assembly in a voice like breaking glass. The humans call themselves intelligent, but their actions show otherwise. They fight over invisible lines on their planet's surface. They kill each other over differences in skin color, in belief, in language. They cannot even agree on basic facts about their own reality. This is not a species ready for contact with the greater galaxy. This is a species that will bring chaos wherever it goes. More murmurs, some of them sounded like agreement. Finally, the collective spoke. They were artificial beings, machines that had gained consciousness millions of years ago. Their voice was cold and precise. Our analysis indicates a 94% probability that humanity will develop faster than light travel within the next 200 years. Our models show that unrestricted human expansion will result in conflict with 17 existing assembly members within 500 years. The logical recommendation is preemptive neutralization. We suggest sterilization of the human as the most efficient solution. The chamber erupted into noise. Some delegates agreed, others argued for quarantine instead. A few suggested simply watching and waiting, but no one noticed suggested welcoming humanity as equals. She raised her hand to speak. The arbiter's attention turned to her. The human representative wishes to address the assembly. Yes, said, I do. But before she could speak, cut in. What could a species so young possibly say that would change the facts we have presented? Their history speaks for itself. Other delegates joined in, their voices overlapping, drowning her out, stood in her place and let the noise wash over her like a wave. She had been in rooms like this before. Rooms where no one wanted to listen. Rooms where the verdict had been decided before the trial began. Her earpiece crackled. Shin's voice came through, stressed and urgent. He was monitoring from the watching everything. Ambassador, they're not listening. The vote is going to happen whether you speak or not. The numbers don't look good. We should consider leaving while we still can. Reached up and removed the earpiece. She placed it gently on the small podium in front of her seat. The noise in the chamber continued. Delegates argued and debated, treating her as if she were not there, as if humanity's fate was something to be decided without human input. Waited, she had learned long ago that patience was a weapon, that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply refuse to be rushed. Eventually, the noise died down. The arbiter's attention returned to her. The human representative may speak. You have 4 minutes. This is the standard allotment for emerging species. 4 minutes to save 8 billion lives. 4 minutes to change minds that had been set for millions of years. Smiled. That will be enough, she said. The chamber fell silent. 4,000 species watched the small human woman standing alone in her designated spot near the bottom of the great sphere. She looked impossibly fragile compared to the beings around her. No armor, no weapons, no protective field, just soft skin and ordinary clothes and eyes that reflected the lights of a million stars. Did not begin with a defense of humanity. She did not list their achievements or explain their culture or beg for understanding. Instead, she asked a question. How many of your species nearly destroyed yourselves before reaching the stars? The silence changed. It became heavier, charged with something like surprise. No emerging species had ever begun their testimony this way. Continued, her voice calm and clear. I have spent the journey here studying your histories, not the official histories you share with new members, but the older records, the ones buried deep in your archives, the ones you don't like to talk about. She turned to face the beings of pure energy who had shown humanity's wars to the assembly. Your species consumed 3 stars before you learned to control your hunger for energy. 3 entire solar systems burned to nothing because you could not stop yourselves. The species that lived in those systems are gone now. Erased. You don't even remember their names. The representative flickered violently. That was millions of years ago. We have evolved since then. Yes, agreed. You have, but you did not start evolved. You started hungry and blind and dangerous just like us. She turned to with his crystalline body and his voice like breaking glass. The fought civil wars that shattered 2 of your own moons. The debris still orbits your today. Your historians call it the Ring of Regret. Millions of your people died because two factions could not agree on the correct way to process light. You killed each other over the equivalent of a religious disagreement. Crystal's structure vibrated with something that might have been anger or shame. We were young then, we did not know better. Exactly, said. You did not know better, but you learned. You survived your own violence and became something greater. Why should humanity not have the same chance? She turned to the collective, the ancient machines who had recommended Earth's sterilization. And you, the collective, your own records show that during the logic purges you deleted 40% of your own population. 40%. You decided that certain forms of thought were inefficient, and you erased the minds that held them. You committed genocide against yourselves in the name of optimization. The collective's voice remained cold, but there was a hesitation in it now. Those were errors in our early programming. We have corrected them. You have corrected them, repeated. After the damage was done, after the deaths. You made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and you learned from them. That is what species do. That is what life does. We break and then we build ourselves back stronger. She spread her arms, addressing the entire chamber now. Her voice rose, not in anger, but in something like wonder. Look at yourselves, all of you. You sit here in this beautiful station, surrounded by art and science and wisdom gathered over millions of years. You call yourselves the assembly of enlightened worlds, but none of you were born enlightened. Every single species here crawled up from darkness. You all have blood on your hands. You all have histories you wish you could forget. The murmurs returned, but they were different now. Less hostile, more uncertain. Lowered her arms, her voice became soft again, almost gentle. Humanity has done terrible things. I will not deny that. We have killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas. We have poisoned our world and built weapons that could end it. Everything you showed in your evidence is true. She paused, letting the words settle. But it is not the whole truth. What else is there? The Arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber. What can balance the destruction your species has caused? Looked up at the ancient being. For a moment, she felt the full weight of its age, its power, its judgment. This creature had existed when her ancestors were still living in caves. It had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. What could she possibly say that would matter to something so old? And then she remembered why she was here. Not because she was special, not because she was powerful, but because she understood something that these ancient beings seemed to have forgotten. Hope, she said. The thing that balances our destruction is hope. The Arbiter tilted its massive head. Explain. Every species in this room took millions of years to reach the stars. Millions of years to learn wisdom, to overcome your violent beginnings, to build something worth preserving. Humanity has had 10,000 years of recorded history. 10,000 years since we stopped being animals and started being something more. And in that tiny sliver of time, we went from scratching pictures on cave walls to standing in this chamber. She stepped forward toward the center of the sphere. No one stopped her. We are still climbing. Every generation we get a little better, a little wiser, a little kinder. Yes, we fall. Yes, we make mistakes. But we get up again, always. That is what humans do. We fail and we fail and we fail and we never stop trying. Her 4 minutes were almost gone. She could feel time running out like sand through her fingers. You can destroy us, she said. You have the power. But before you do, ask yourselves one question. Look at how far we have come in 10,000 years. Imagine where we could be in 1,000,000. Is that a future you want to erase, or is it a future you want to see? The chamber was completely silent now. Not the hostile silence of before, but something deeper, something thoughtful. The Arbiter raised a limb to speak. Your time is. I'm not finished. Every being in the chamber froze. No species had ever interrupted the Arbiter. Not in 2 million years of assembly history. Stood alone in the center of the sphere, surrounded by creatures that could destroy her world with a thought. And she did not look afraid. I said I'm not finished, she repeated. And you're going to listen. Silence in the grand chamber was absolute. 4,000 species held their breath, their sensors, their awareness focused on the small human woman who had just done the unthinkable. She had interrupted the Arbiter. She had demanded to be heard. The Arbiter itself seemed frozen, its massive form still as stone. Symbols on its surface flickered in patterns that no translator could read. Finally, it spoke. No species has ever interrupted this body, not in 2 million years. Then it was time someone did, replied. Her voice was steady. Her hands did not shake. "You have spent hours telling us what humanity has done wrong. Now you will spend a few more minutes seeing what we have done right." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It was unauthorized. Bringing technology into the grand chamber was forbidden. Guards throughout the chamber moved forward, but the Arbiter raised a limb and they stopped. "Show us," the Arbiter said. There was something new in its voice, not anger, curiosity. Activated the device. Holographic images flooded the chamber. Not the images of war and destruction that the assembly had shown, but something different. Something the ancient species had not expected. The first image showed a city on fire, earthquake, buildings falling, smoke rising, chaos everywhere. But in the middle of the destruction, humans were running, not away from the danger, but toward it. Firefighters pulling strangers from rubble, doctors treating wounds in the streets. Ordinary people forming chains to pass water and food to those who needed it. "This is what humans do when disaster strikes," said. "We run toward the fire, we help strangers we will never meet again, we risk our lives for people whose names we do not know." The images changed. A hospital during a plague, medical workers in protective suits, exhausted, working around the clock. One nurse had written on her mask, "We stay for you." Behind her, the bodies of her colleagues who had died doing the same work. Our doctors do not run when disease comes. They stay, they fight, they die standing between death and their patients. More images. A soldier carrying a wounded enemy across a battlefield. A group of humans forming a shield around a stranger being attacked. Children sharing food with other children who had none. An old woman giving her coat to a homeless man in the snow. You see our violence and call us monsters, but you do not see this. You do not see the million small acts of kindness that happen every day on our world. You do not see the teachers who work for nothing because they believe in the future. The parents who sacrifice everything for children they will never control. The strangers who stop to help when no one is watching. The delegate spoke. His voice was less certain now. "Pretty images do not erase your capacity for destruction. Every species has moments of kindness. That does not make them safe." Turn to face him. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a curious child might study an interesting insect. The gesture was small, almost nothing. But somehow in that tiny movement, something changed in the chamber. The beings watching saw something they had never seen from an emerging species. They saw complete and total absence of fear. Not courage. Courage is what you show when you are afraid but act anyway. This was different. This was a being who had looked at the power arrayed against her, had calculated the odds, had understood exactly what the assembly could do to her world, and had simply decided not to be afraid. It was, for many of the ancient species, deeply unsettling. "You misunderstand," said softly. "I am not here to beg for mercy." The chamber seemed to contract around her words. "Then why are you here?" the Arbiter asked. Smiled, it was not a threatening smile. It was warm, almost kind. But behind it was something hard as steel. "I am here to offer you a choice." Laughter rippled through some parts of the chamber. The idea of a primitive species offering choices to the assembly was absurd. But the laughter died quickly. Something about the humans' calm made it hard to laugh. "What choice could you possibly offer us?" the collective asked. "We are 4,000 species. We control territories spanning millions of light years. You are one world. One small world full of one young species. You have nothing to bargain with." Nodded slowly. "You're right. We have no fleet that could threaten you. No weapon that could harm you. No technology that you do not already possess. By every measure that matters to you, we are nothing." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But you are afraid of us anyway." More silence, uncomfortable silence. "You would not have called this assembly if you were not afraid. You would not be debating our destruction if you did not see us as a threat. You look at us and you see something that worries you, something that keeps your strategists awake at night." She began to walk slowly around the center of the sphere, making eye contact with delegate after delegate. "You see a species that went from stone tools to nuclear weapons in 10,000 years. A species that never stops, never gives up, never accepts that something is impossible. You see a species that looks at barriers and treats them as challenges. That looks at the word no and hears not yet." Her voice grew softer, but somehow it carried further. "You see a species that has survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have ended us 100 times over. And we are still here, still growing, still reaching. She stopped walking and faced the Arbiter directly. That is what frightens you, not our weapons, not our violence, our determination. Because you know deep in whatever passes for your souls that if you give us time, we will become something you cannot predict or control. The Arbiter's symbols flickered rapidly. And if that is true, if you are as dangerous as you say, is that not an argument for stopping you now while we still can? Tilted her head again, that small, curious gesture that held no fear at all. Perhaps, she said, but consider this, everything I have just told you about humanity I told you honestly. I did not hide our nature. I did not pretend we are peaceful or wise or ready. I told you exactly what we are. She spread her hands. Does that seem like the behavior of a species that wants to be your enemy? The question hung in the air unanswered. Let it hang. She had said what she needed to say. Now it was time for the final move. The grand chamber waited. 4,000 species, beings of energy and crystal and metal and flesh, all focused on the small human woman who had somehow taken control of the most powerful gathering in the galaxy. Stood in the center of it all, calm as a still pond, and prepared to make her final argument. You have 3 options, she said. Let me explain what each one means. She held up one finger. First, you can quarantine us. Build a wall around our solar system. Block our signals, destroy any ship that tries to leave, wait for us to die of old age or kill ourselves. This is the safe option, the careful option. She paused. It will not work. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The collective spoke. Our models suggest quarantine has a 73% success rate over a 10,000-year period. Your models are wrong, said simply. You do not understand us yet. We spent 100,000 years trapped on one small planet and we never stopped trying to leave. We built towers to reach the sky. We built ships to cross the oceans. We built rockets to touch the stars. When something stands in our way, we do not accept it. We find a way through or around or over. Given enough time, we will break any wall you build. That is not a threat. That is simply what we are. She held up a second finger. Second, you can destroy us, sterilize Earth, hunt down every human colony ship, every space station, every hidden base. Make sure not a single one of us survives. Her voice remained calm, almost casual, as if she were discussing the weather. This might work. We are young and weak and you have weapons we cannot imagine, but consider the cost. We have already sent ships beyond your borders. We scatter like seeds in the wind. Can you find all of us? Are you certain? Because if you miss even one ship, even one colony, even one frozen embryo drifting in the dark, then in 1,000 years you will face our children, and they will remember what you did. She let that sink in. The chamber was very quiet. Humans have long memories. We tell stories about wrongs done to us thousands of years ago. We name our children after heroes who died fighting impossible odds. If you destroy Earth, you will not end humanity. You will create a legend, a cause, a hatred that will burn for generations. Every human born for the next 1,000,000 years will grow up knowing one thing: the assembly killed their home, and they will never ever stop coming for you. The delegate flickered nervously. You speak as though you want us to fear you. No, said. I speak as though I want you to understand us. Fear is not the point. Truth is the point. I am telling you what will happen if you choose violence. I am giving you information so you can make a wise decision. She held up a third finger. Third, you can let us join you. Accept us as members of this assembly. Give us a seat at the table, a voice in your councils, a place among the stars. Made a sound like shattering ice. Absurd. You have just admitted you are dangerous. Why would we invite danger into our home? Because danger is not the same as evil, replied. Yes, we are dangerous, but we are also creative, determined, adaptable, and loyal. We protect those we consider friends with the same passion we fight those we consider enemies. You could have us as enemies, forever circling your borders, waiting for a moment of weakness. Or you could have us as partners, bringing our energy and our drive to your causes. She began walking again, slowly circling the center of the sphere. You have existed for 2,000,000 years. In that time you have built wonders, but I have studied your history and I have noticed something. Your growth has slowed. Your great discoveries came long ago. Your art, your science, your philosophy all reached their peaks thousands of years in the past. You are not dying, but you are not truly living either. You are maintaining. Some delegates stirred uncomfortably. She had touched something true. Humanity is young, reckless, foolish. All the things you have said about us are accurate, But we are also hungry in ways you have forgotten how to be. We look at the universe and we see not what is, but what could be. We dream impossible dreams and then we make them real. That is our gift. That is what we could bring to your assembly if you let us. She stopped walking and faced the Arbiter one final time. So, those are your choices. Quarantine us and fail, destroy us and create an eternal enemy, or welcome us and gain an ally unlike any you have known. The decision is yours. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. I have said everything I came to say. Thank you for listening. The chamber erupted into noise. Delegates argued, debated, shouted at each other in languages the translators could barely process. The sound was overwhelming, a wall of alien voices discussing the fate of humanity. Stood in the center of it all, waiting. She had done what she could. The rest was not in her control. After what felt like hours, the Arbiter raised its limbs and the chamber fell silent. The Assembly will vote, it announced, all in favor of quarantine. A portion of the chamber lit up with signals indicating agreement, counted quickly, perhaps 30%. All in favor of neutralization. Another portion lit up, smaller, maybe 15%. The collective was among them, but they were nearly alone. All in favor of provisional membership. The rest of the chamber lit up, 55% at least, felt something loosen in her chest, something she had not realized she was holding tight. The motion carries, the Arbiter announced. Humanity is granted provisional membership in the Assembly of Enlightened Worlds. They will be assigned a mentor species and given 1,000 years to prove they are worthy of full membership. This session is concluded. The delegates began to disperse. Many of them passed by, studying her with new eyes. Some nodded respectfully. Others kept their distance, still unsure. But none of them looked at her the way they had at the beginning of the session. She was no longer a primitive to be judged. She was something else now, something unexpected. Walked back to the docking bay alone. Her legs were shaking slightly, though she did not let it show. The weight she had been carrying for days was finally beginning to lift. Was waiting at the airlock. His eyes were wide, his face pale. He had watched the whole thing from the ship. "What did you do in there?" he asked. Shrugged, suddenly very tired. "I told them the truth." "That was insane. You interrupted the Arbiter. You threatened them. You basically told them we'd haunt them forever if they killed us." "Yes. And it worked." "Yes." Stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing. It was slightly hysterical laughter, the kind that comes from released tension, but it was real. "You're terrifying," he said. "You know that." Smiled. "I've been told." Behind them, Station Eternity continued its slow rotation among the stars. Somewhere in its ancient halls, the Arbiter watched the small human vessel preparing to depart. In 2 million years, no emerging species had ever addressed the Assembly the way Park had. The Arbiter's vast mind turned over her words, again and again. "Perhaps," it said to no one in particular, "we should have invited them sooner." The left Station Eternity and began the long journey home. Sat by the observation window watching the stars. Somewhere ahead, Earth waited. 8 billion people who did not yet know their fate had been decided. She thought about what came next. 1,000 years of probation. 1,000 years of proving that humanity deserved its place among the stars. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks, failures, moments when the Assembly would question their decision. But humanity would endure. They always had. She closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But for now, for this one moment, she allowed herself to feel something like peace. They were going to be okay. They were going to be more than okay. They were going to be magnificent.